Inequality in the world economy. This chapter covers income distribution in selected countries, global inequality and its trends, meaning of Gini ratio, world Gini ratio, world trend. The data on the distribution of income across rich and poor nations reveal much more inequality. The population of the world in 2008 was approximately 6.7 billion. Of that number, 1.0 billion or 15% live in what the World Bank classifies as low income countries. The average income per capita in those countries was $524 in 2008. The same year, about 1.1 billion or 15% lived in high income countries, where per capita income was $39,345. When you look at total national income, the rich countries with 15% of the population earn 73% of world income, while the poor countries with 15% of the population get only 1% of world income. The poorest country in the world in 2008 was Burundi, with 8 million people and a per capita income of 140 per year. The richest country was Norway, with 5 million people and a per capita income of $87,070.1. Income distribution in selected countries. By inspecting the income distribution data for every country, we can compare the degree of income inequality and identify the countries with the most inequality and those with the least inequality. Figure summarizes some extremes and shows where the United States lies in the range of degrees of income inequality. Look first at the numbers in the table. They tell us that the Brazil and South Africa, the poorest 20% of households receive only 2% of total income, while the highest 20% receive 65% of total income. An average person in the highest quintile receives 32.5 times the income of an average person in the lowest quintile. Inequality is large in these countries because they have a relatively small but rich European population and a large and relatively poor indigenous population. Contrast these numbers with those for Finland and Sweden. In these countries, the poorest 20% received 8% of total income and the highest 20% received 35%. So an average person in the highest quintile received 4.4 times the income of an average person in the lowest quintile. Income distributions similar to these are found in many European countries in which governments pursue aggressive income redistribution policies. The numbers for the United States lie between these extremes, with an average person in the highest quintile receiving just under 10 times the amount received by an average person in the lowest quintile. Global inequality and its trends. The global distribution of income is much more unequal than the distribution within any one country. The reason is that many countries, especially in Africa and Asia, are in a pre-industrial stage of economic development and are poor, while industrial countries such as the United States are rich. So the average American earns 46 times the income of one of the world's 3 billion poorest people and more than 11.5 times the income of 80% of the people who live in developing economies. An American with the average income in the highest quintile earns 184 times that of the world's poorest people, but only 15 times that of an average bottom quintile American. Gini ratio. We can compare world inequality with US inequality by comparing Gini ratios, a commonly used measure of the degree of inequality of income derived from a Lorenz curve. It can range from 0 to a maximum of 1. The income inequality described by the Lorenz curve can be transformed into a Gini ratio, a numerical measure of the overall dispersion of income. As the area between the Lorenz curve and the diagonal gets larger, the Gini ratio rises to reflect greater inequality. Lower Gini ratios denote less inequality. Higher ratios indicate more inequality. The Gini coefficient for complete inequality is 0 and for complete inequality 1. The Gini ratio for the distribution shown is 0.480. World Gini ratio. We can compare world inequality with US inequality by comparing Gini ratios. You saw that the US Gini ratio in 2009 was about 0.47. The world Gini ratio is about 0.64. Recalling the interpretation of the Gini ratio in terms of the Lorenz curve, the world Lorenz curve lies much farther from the line of equality than the US Lorenz curve. World trend. You saw that income have become more unequal in the United States. The Gini ratio has increased. The same trends are found in most economies. Increased income inequality is a big issue in two of the world's largest and poorer nations, China and India. In these two economies, urban middle class are getting richer at a faster pace than the rural farmers. Despite greater inequality within countries, the world is becoming less unequal. Figure shows this trend towards less inequality as measured by the World Gini ratio. How can the world income distribution become less unequal while individual countries become more unequal? The answer is that average income in poorer countries are rising much faster than the average incomes in rich countries, while the gap between rich and poor is widening within countries, it is narrowing across countries.